Okay, friends, we are in week 4, and we're continuing our look at the second half of Matthew 5. And remember what we're going after here. We're looking at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, which is this incredible teaching that Jesus gives about how best to live in this world. So we're going to look at today are 6 examples that he gives about how what he talked about earlier, and we talked about this on Monday, how what he talked about earlier, how it actually plays out. So I want to show you these 6 examples. I want to show you a pattern in them. And I think that this is helpful because, again, what is happening, and we talked about this on Monday, is that Jesus is saying, look, I haven't come to do away with the previous way in which we pursued God. You know, the Old Testament law, what he would have just called the scripture, the law, it's good. And it's about how best to live in this world, how best to love God and love other people. And we're not doing away with that, but what we're doing is we're building on top of it. We're not doing something new here apart from what was old. We're doing something new on top of what was old. And we can trust today that what it looks like to fulfill the law, what it looks like to be a follower of God, is to walk in the way that Jesus teaches and to walk in the way that Jesus lived, because Jesus fulfills the Old Testament law. So now we glean from it and we learn from it and we study it and we grow from it and we follow Jesus because he fulfills that law, he lives into it and teaches us the new way to live. The new way to orient our lives is what it's about, to orient our lives towards loving God and loving other people. So this is what he says. He says, and this is what we did on Monday. Look, not doing away with this, building on top of it. And then he gives 6 examples of how he's doing this. And look, you can extrapolate from these 6 other ways in which this is happening. And we see more examples later in the way that he lives his life. But right off the bat, he gives us explicitly 6 ways that this is working. And I want you to see this pattern. Each time he says, you have heard that it was said. So this is like the Old Testament. But I say to you. He's not saying you have heard it said. Now get rid of that. I'm going to give you something new. He says, you have heard it said. Now let's build on top of that. Now let's go even further. So look at these examples that he gives. He says, look, concerning like anger, murder, you've heard it said don't murder. Okay, pretty low bar, okay? You've heard it said don't murder. But what I say to you is don't even harbor anger. I mean, if somebody cuts you off in traffic, you're probably doing pretty good with the don't murder. Hey, how are you doing with the don't even harbor anger towards that person? It doesn't mean don't like get that jolt of adrenaline and be angry at that person. It means don't harp on it. Don't keep calling them names. Don't go down the road continuing to harbor anger towards that person. He says, look, that not to commit adultery. Let's go a little higher. It's not even lust, okay? And anything that's causing you to lust, you need to cut that out of your life. One of the things that we're going to talk about tomorrow in a conversation that I'm having with Michelle Geelan, who we talked about last week, is the power of like small things to lead us in a positive or negative direction. And Jesus says when it comes to lust, you got to be really careful. You got to be willing to even like cut off your hand or lop out your eye. He's speaking in extremes here. I think what he's saying to us, you got to be willing to break your phone or cut off the internet to your room if it's causing you to lust. Because guess what? You harbor that lust in your heart, it will bleed in to the rest of your life. So look, got the foundation here in the Old Testament, but we're going to build on top of it. The lust one is really connected to the next one about divorce. So look, here's the deal. You have heard it said that if you're going to divorce your wife, women didn't have the right to divorce their husbands at the time. Okay, so he's talking to men here. If you're going to divorce your wife, give her a certificate of divorce. Don't just leave her willy-nilly, but you got to give some acknowledgement of this. You can't just wake up one morning and kick her out. Okay, got to give some kind of acknowledgement. But what I say to you is, except for in certain circumstances, you can't divorce her. Don't divorce her. We're gonna come back to that one in a second. And when it comes to oaths, he says, look, here's the thing. And you can just look, as I'm reading through this, I hope that you're mentioning, I hope you're looking at them. With oaths, he says, you've heard it said, the Old Testament says, look, we're not gonna be people who swear falsely. Don't swear falsly. Jesus says, let's build on top of that. Not a new thing, but we're gonna build on top of it. How about we just be people that don't swear oaths at all? Meaning just let your yes be yes and your no be no. How about we just be people that do what we say we're going to do, and we don't do the things we're not going to say to do. You don't have to swear anything. People just, you're trustworthy. When it comes to retaliation, look, the Old Testament says, look, if somebody knocks out your tooth, you have the right to knock out their tooth. Somebody knocks out your eye, you have the right to knock out their eye. We talked about this a lot in our Exodus study, but it's actually a radical move towards mercy, because most of the world doesn't actually operate that way. You knock out my tooth, like I'm coming for a couple of your teeth, right? That's just the way that the world normally works. Like you hose me in a business deal, I'm not just going to expect you to pay me back exactly what you owe me, right? I'm coming after you, right? Hey, so that's already a move towards mercy. But then Jesus says, look, we're not even going to retaliate. This is like the turning the other cheek thing. Turning the other cheek doesn't mean you don't defend yourself. It doesn't mean if somebody is trying to harm you and do you bodily harm or your family that you just roll over. Like the slapping is probably something like you didn't pay your taxes and the Roman centurion or the Roman tax collector slapped you in the face, right? It means you don't haul off and sock them. It means, look, you don't agree with what they're doing, but you just kind of take it. And you turn the other cheek, because what are we going to be? We're going to be people who don't even retaliate, who don't even try to hurt the people that hurt us. And then the last one, you've heard it said that what we're going to do is we're going to love our neighbor and we're going to hate our enemies. Jesus says we're going to build even more on top of that commandment. We're not getting rid of that. We're going even more. We're going to love our neighbors and we're going to love our enemies. We're going to do both. Do you see what he's doing here? You see how brilliant it is? And again, he is meant to be seen as the new Moses, the new one who, and we got a great, I got it right here, a great handout that you can find online that talks about all the ways that Jesus and Moses are connected. You can find it online, or we've got copies of it. You can pick one up on Sunday. And he's meant to be seen as the new Moses, the new one who is teaching the people how best to live. The new one who's teaching people how to live well in this world, ultimately what it means to be people who are orienting our lives towards God and towards other people. And here are just a few examples. That's what Jesus does. And you notice a few things here. One of the things that you notice is that Jesus is far more concerned than what's happening in the Old Testament with people's inner state, with what's happening inside their hearts and inside their minds. Because he knows that what's happening inside of your heart and inside of your mind leads to what's happening on the outside. This is, comes to stuff we'll talk about later, where they think that he has come to physically save them from Rome, but what he's come to save them from their inner spiritual depravity. He's come to save them from that. I mean, this relates to what we talked about with the Beatitudes, where what is ultimately going to help people to feel that blessedness, that joy that comes from a relationship with Jesus is not necessarily their external circumstances changing, but things changing inside of them. Okay. Well, this divorce one's hard. Okay, what do we do with the divorce one? Well, notice this. Again, as I said, women couldn't initiate divorces. So what we're talking about here is men leaving their wives. So it says that in the Old Testament that, at least what men were required was to give a certificate of divorce. I don't know exactly what that means, but it seems to be pointing towards the fact that, and I'm sure other people do, I just haven't researched it, that you can't just leave them kind of willy-nilly. But you get to Jesus' time, and men are divorcing their wives for silly reasons. I mean, for reasons that are not justified by any definition of that term. And what Jesus says is we're actually going to raise the expectation on men staying in marriages. What happens to women when the husbands leave them? Well, this is in the ancient world. Well, many of them turn to prostitution to support themselves and to support their families. Some of them became beggars. The most fortunate ones got remarried. Hey, look, I mean, what is this law about? So often we think that Jesus' commandments are these like arbitrary rules, like just to see we'll follow them. But come on, this isn't about being a prude. The historic sexual teachings in Christianity aren't about keeping people from having fun. The rules have reasons. There's a purpose for them. And what is the purpose of this one? I mean, come on, look at it. It's right there. It's to protect women. And it's to protect children. And look at what has happened over our last couple of decades as we have eroded our Christian sexual ethic in our culture. What has happened? Who gets hosed? I mean, come on. Who gets hosed? It's the women and the kids. This is not about being a prude. And the other sexual ethics, it's not about being a prude. It's about protecting the most vulnerable. We could go into that more, but we can't right now. It's about protecting the most vulnerable. So what does Jesus say? He says, but I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife except on the grounds of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. We could go into the whole remarriage thing, but we're not. I think what is happening right here is that Jesus is saying, and you need to recognize that the ramifications for you leaving your wife, they go on for a long time. It not only hurts you, come on buddy, it does, but it hurts her. And it affects like the future marriage that she's gonna have and all of these things. You don't think that what you are doing like only affects you. Open your eyes here. I think that's what's going on. You can see that there is an out here, which is sexual immorality. I expand that when I talk to people based on other things that are in the scripture, and that we talk about the A's, adultery, abuse, and abandonment. And addiction gets tricky also when that is a factor in the marriage. There are times when person A breaks the marriage vow and person B, initiates the legal process. But it's person A that broke it. Person B is just responding to the fact that they already broke it. So there are times when it is justified, clearly, Jesus is saying here. There are times when it is justified to initiate divorce, but he is also clearly saying what's happening here. He's clearly elevating the expectation about men, and by extension into today's society, women, by staying in marriages. Now, look, again, there are outs. There are times when the best option is to end the marriage because there's abuse in particular. If there's abuse, you got to get out, and we can help you at the church with that. And we want to help you in the church if you're in an abusive relationship. There are times when there's abandonment or adultery, and maybe divorce is the only, not only, but the best option here. But Jesus is saying, it needs to be rare, and it needs to only be in those situations. Like, just not being in love with the person anymore is not on the list. One of the things that I'll say in almost all the wedding ceremonies that I do in the sermon is, look, notice this about your vows. They say nothing about how you'll feel for the rest of your life. They're all about how you'll choose to live. And if couples want to write their own vows, I'm fine with that, but I have to see them beforehand. Because if they try to sneak in there, I promise that I'll feel, such joy every morning when I roll over and see you for the rest of my life. That garbage is coming out because you can't actually promise that. True love begins when you don't feel love and you act out of love anyway. That's like real love stuff. And Jesus seems to be raising the bar here, saying, yeah, come on. If you're going to commit to marriage, and this, again, it's different for us today. I mean, we get married in different ways than we do now, but it seems to see what he's saying to us now is, look, if you're going to commit to this marriage thing, you're not going to get out of it just willy-nilly. And you need to understand there are ramifications to this. So there are times when this is probably justified. This is my words, not Jesus. I don't know. But you need to understand how serious this is. So I think that's what's happening here. So what Jesus is doing is Jesus is taking the law of the Old Testament and he's building on top of it. But ultimately, let's come back to this to wrap up. What is this all about? This is about Jesus teaching us how to orient our lives towards loving God and towards loving people. That's what it comes back to. And what we seek to do today, this is what we're studying Matthew, come on, is we seek to be people who walk in the way of Jesus, who look at how he taught to live and look at how he actually lived and seek to do that ourselves also. Okay, got this great conversation for you tomorrow with Michelle, and then we've got more kind of wrapping up this week on Friday. God bless you, friends, and I'll see you then.